All right, it's the Sunday review. It is Sunday, October 27th, 1:30 p.m. Eastern Standard. Really packed week this week as far as the earnings calendar, and we've got a lot of interesting trades on. So let's start with positions we're in, then we'll talk through positions we're looking at, and then we'll talk through the upcoming earnings week. So, and I'm going to be doing this as I go a little bit here of some of the technical analysis given the positions that we're going to be watching. I'll kind of show you guys a little bit of how I also review positions for the week and run a couple of different technical indicators. So let's just start with the positions we're in here. So we're currently in long on Ethereum, and I'm in long Ethereum through an ETF. I'm going to open up. Just kind of show you, this is to me an accumulation range here. We're really stuck in a channel between Ethereum and Bitcoin here with kind of this accumulation range, and then I would say this kind of selling range here up on the top. So accumulating down here, and then possible liquidation up here. We're currently trading in the lower range. If you look at Bitcoin, Bitcoin has actually been a little bit stronger in the past couple of weeks here. So I can imagine Ethereum playing catch up over the next coming weeks. We're going to have to see. I mean, these are very risk on assets lately. So as the market goes up and down, same thing's happening with Bitcoin and Ethereum. They're not directly correlated to the market, and there's also periods of time where they're not correlated at all. Right now, it seems to be pretty well correlated for Bitcoin, not as much for Ethereum. Ethereum lagging a little bit here, but we're accumulating a position during this accumulation range, and we're going to continue adding to that position. The other things that I really like is the South African Rand, and I've talked about this one on a couple of reports here. This thing is seeing some down pressure, and it's currently tagging the top of the channel, getting rejected. We've been trading in this kind of chopped sideways channel here for a little while. The positioning on this is insane, and I've shared this in other video reports. I'm not going to jump into it again now, but a lot of speculators have gotten crowded here on pushing this thing long and pushing this thing up, and commercials have been hedging at these prices and wanting this to go lower. So we are now starting to see this thing roll over, and I do think there's quite a bit of a ways for us to go lower. Now, this is the same thing for the Aussie dollar. So we're short the Aussie dollar here, and again, just very crowded. It's interesting because the speculators are starting to sell heavily into the euro, into the pound. But when you go to the Aussie dollar, they're not they're not really doing a whole lot of selling as of right now, and we have seen quite a bit of a decline. Aussie dollar actually tagged, I think it was like a 30-day low. If we pull this up, yeah, 30-day low on Friday. Really good downward pressure here. We're in on a couple of positions, and I'm really liking the price action there. So continuing to short that market as well. Now let's talk through a few other positions that I am liking. I'm in long, continue to be long on the NASDAQ, and we've actually seen quite an interesting play here as the NASDAQ starting to catch up and actually led on Friday for price action. Speculators are not getting very long on NASDAQ right now. They're actually starting to go more short. So that's good for us. We want to fade the speculators. Commercials are actually starting to drive this thing up. I might actually look to accumulate more if this potentially gets a dip and a pullback. Now, one caveat, and this is something that I'll talk about shortly, is I am looking at potentially shorting either the Russell or the S&P as a hedge as we go into a very volatile week and the election coming up in the election's the following week. So this week is just an insane amount of company earnings, which I'll talk through, but also the election coming up, and then the Russell being extremely crowded and set up for us to go short. And then the S&P at all-time highs here. I just think there's going to be a volatile week. I'm not saying the markets are going to go down over the long haul. I actually think with the Trump victory priced in, if Trump wins, markets are going to continue to rally. Might have a sell the news, but I do think these things continue on higher through the rest of the year. But I think it's a good hedge because I think we are going to see some chop in the next 2 weeks with the earnings calendar being stacked, and then also with that election. So that's just kind of my thoughts here and how I'm considering positioning with equities. But we are currently long the NASDAQ and potentially going to add to that position. I am also looking at live cattle. We talked about this. This is set up. I jumped in a little preliminary here. We are seeing it getting rejected off of this top range here. I would like to see this start to roll over. And I'd like to also show you guys the one of the charts that I use when I am reviewing markets for the week. I've got a seasonality index, and I've also got an extrapolation of a forecasting extrapolation model here. And this is forecasting live cattle to actually be starting to roll over, and that prices should actually be substantially lower than they are. Now, if you look here as well, this is saying that Friday should have been the seasonal high for live cattle. Historically, over the past 47 years, this has been a bullish month and a bullish season for live cattle. However, it starts to roll over here and the price action really starts to decline. And we should see a seasonal low by sometime next week. So we should see this start to roll over. Ideally, and then potentially have a seasonal low. Now, that's just probabilities. We don't know if that's actually going to happen, but that is what it's looking like. And that's also how this commitment of traders is currently stacked up with the speculators versus the commercials. This thing looks like it's ready to roll over at some point. It looks from a timing standpoint, this thing should roll over. And then from a velocity of the move with the commitment of traders and how people are positioned, this thing should really have a sell off when it does start to rotate over. So just something to keep an eye on. And I'll talk through kind of how I evaluate these markets in a second as well. But that's the other position we're in. We're also in on crude long and natural gas long. Natural gas had a news failure on Friday, so we had inventories report come out where inventories were higher than expected. However, natural gas still rose about 10% that day, which was, or I believe it was up about 4% that day, but 10% the prior day. So we're seeing a lot of price action and rotation into going long here on nat gas. And we're also seeing the speculators pushing this thing much lower with the commercials starting to hedge this thing and potentially expecting it to go up. So really good price action with the news failure, with the commitment of trader data showing us that we should be long here. So we're currently in long on that position as well. So that's looking pretty good here. Other positions that we are in, like I said, crude oil, we're back in long. We're in a small profit here. This thing's starting to look like it's trying to find a bottom here, and it's this still does look bullish. A lot of people are pricing this thing to go lower and lower, and some crazy, not so good traders that are in this game on YouTube. The YouTubers are saying $50 oil. I'm not seeing that. I mean, I see maybe a head and shoulders here that could justify if this did roll over, we could go towards 60, 65. But I'm liking the price action here. We're seeing a little bit of a floor and a base, and if this thing rejects the head and shoulders, it's probably going to head to $77 at a minimum. We've got heavy resistance at 77, but yeah, let's see. And I also like the way that speculators and commercials are positioned on crude, so we're going to stay long there. And it closed up 2.1 on Friday, so that was some really good price action. Last position we are in is shorting cocoa. Why are we shorting cocoa? We are shorting cocoa because we just do things, in the words of the Joker. No, in all seriousness, cocoa is looking from commitment to trader standpoint like there is some opportunity for a high velocity move to the downside if this thing does rotate and roll over. But more so, what I'm looking at is this wedge pattern break. So we're seeing a break to the downside of this wedge pattern. We actually had a close lower. So two things. This closed lower on Thursday, and then it tried to fight back. It closed green, but it's still lower than this channel here for the Friday close. So it's actually very bearish. I would say this is a very bearish chart, and we should see this really start to roll over. I don't see a very drastic move, but I do see us going lower here. We keep tagging the top of the channel, getting rejected. Tag it once, tag it a second time, tag it a third time, tag it a fourth time, tag five times, and then we see this, same thing on the bottom channel. It's 1, 2 hits, 3 hits, 4 hits, 5 hits, and a break. I think that break, high probability we go lower here before we go higher and tag the top of the channel. Now, given the fact that we've tagged the top of the channel multiple times here, it is due for a breakout at some point. But right now, I think we're favoring a breakdown before we bounce back and go for a breakout. Now, there's a couple ways that you can do this as far as Fibonacci's. I mean, we can try to go kind of the scene of the original breakout to the top of the channel here. We can look and see Fibonacci levels, and we're currently, and again, that 618 has been a key level here where it has kind of fluctuated and stayed at, and now it's starting to break lower. So I see us probably getting to this 78% retrace before we head higher here. So I'm looking at that 78% retrace as a potential channel for us to end up taking profits. So that's what we're looking at in the cocoa market. Other positions that I like or am watching, we talked about live cattle. Soybean oil is max crowded on the, let's see, that's soybean oil here. On the long side, So this is set up short. We're actually coming close to the top of the channel here. I would like to see this get rejected off the channel and then us consider taking a short position. Now we'll have to watch the WASDE, the agricultural report that comes out not this coming week, but next week. And that may help us with a news failure, but going to be watching this closely. I like cotton long. It's not quite there yet, but we're going to watch it. I like the Russell as well, and I'm actually going to move that to an A trade because that's actually set up for us. I think the Russell trade might be a good trade to consider taking this week. If we get a good up movement, we would sell the rally because I think we're going to have some volatility this week. Cotton, like I said, we're looking at euros getting close to going long. People have really bid the euro into the ground here. Broke two channels that I was tracking. Yeah, they're actually getting close to this interesting trend line that's going to be coming up there. They're here. Make an alert. And then silver, I like long on pullbacks. We're a little high right now. We're getting a correction towards the end of the week here, but I'd like to see a little bit more of a pullback down to like 32 and change. Platinum, we're at a seasonal low now. I'd like to maybe sell the next rally on platinum as well. Again, I mentioned maybe shorting the S&P or the Russell. I'm not totally sure what we're going to do there yet, but we'll figure that one out soon. And then what am I tracking for stocks? So we're watching. It's actually a really packed earnings calendar coming up here. So if we look at the earnings whisper, this is just an insane earnings week. We have Biogen, we've got oil companies, we've got Caterpillar, Roku, we've got the tech companies, Apple, Amazon, Intel, Uber, Sophie, AMD, McDonald's, like Chipotle. We've got a mix of everything from retail to consumer goods to industrial to tech. There's a really good mix here. There's some travel with Royal Caribbean, JetBlue. This is stacked calendar. There's going to be a lot going on here to watch out for. And what I like to do as well, and I'll have all this in the report here of just any like key upcoming events. I like to track the calendars for the currencies that I might currently be trading. So Aussie dollar, we're shorting. What do we have going on? We have the CPI this week. We've got PPI as well. We've got an interest rate decision that's the following week. And then the South Africa Rand, we've got PPI coming up this week. And then for the cattle markets, I like to watch this cattle report. So we'll keep an eye on any news here that might be bullish, even though price closes lower, which would be bearish, and that would be a news failure. So we keep an eye out on that. And then we've got kind of the weekly economic calendar for the U.S. market. And then I also track, this one's a little bit more in depth, so we can track kind of natural gas or crude oil inventories. We've got crude inventories and nat gas on, I believe, Wednesday is usually the day for that. Yeah, it's got to be Wednesday. There's a lot of stuff on that day. Yeah, Wednesday. Yeah, we'll look at this week. We've got ADP employment. GDP is going to be, Wednesday is going to be a packed day. Thursday, we have PCE, PMI. We've got Friday is going to be unemployment, which is just the week before the election. It's probably the last event before the election because I believe election day is, the 5th Tuesday. Interesting. Okay. Just reading that article too. I don't know if you guys saw that. It's, ballots will be after election day are invalid. Federal appeals court rules. That makes sense. But yeah, we also look. So I go on TradingView here, and I run the seasonality index, and I extrapolate a forecasting model here just to figure out, where should price be going based on history, how price actions worked in the past. But yeah, this is what we're looking at. This is a packed week. A lot of positions we're in, a lot of things we're watching. Tesla had a phenomenal week last week. If we look at the price action there, look at these two monster candles, and it closed near the high of the day that it was trading at. If we get above 270 here, this thing's going to rip. This thing's going back to 300, and it's going to go higher. I actually don't think when's the last time we saw a week that was this high? This traded in a range of $57 in a week. I mean, besides, back in July, $52, we saw it trade 46. When's the last time it was over 50? 46 here on a rally. It's been a while. $250 back in 2022 when it topped out at 300 and 380. Man, I mean, imagine a week like this. $50 traded up from 250 to 300. The following week it traded up $44, closed about $40 higher. The following week it traded in a range $20, and then the following week it traded up another 43. We had a move there 3 weeks from 250 to 380. That's a crazy move. And if we see Trump get in office with Elon kind of campaigning alongside him, Tesla's going to rip higher there. And they had a phenomenal earnings report. A lot of exciting stuff there. Good margins, delivery numbers. They beat earnings per share. Energy sector is exploding for them. A lot of things to be bullish about there. But yeah, we're that's what we're looking at. The only other thing I would point out is I like Coursera here. We had a sell-off after earnings. I'm accumulating Coursera. I already bought more on Friday on the dip, and we had a bit of a pop, and we've even got a gap fill that we're going to watch out for. We'll create an alert for that since it gapped down quite a bit. We have a gap that filled there. We have a gap that formed there. We still have the gap. Well, that filled. Yeah, we've got all these gaps that have happened and filled, which we took profit here at the gap fill, which was great. Sold off, and now we're buying again. So I really like Coursera at these prices. They have very good cash on the balance sheet, and they're in a very strong position. So yeah, there's a long report, but there's a lot going on. So that's what we're looking at, and we'll talk again during the week. Thanks, guys.